These French words are used in English all the time, but as a French person, I have to admit that they don't always make sense to me, and it can sometimes be really confusing. Like when I first moved to the US and I went to the restaurant and people asked me if I wanted to share entrees. So entree is a French word that literally means entrance, and in France it also means appetizer. So if I'm sharing entrees in France, I'm expecting something small that I'll have before my main dish. And because it's small, I usually like to order a lot of them. And as you can expect, that's not really what happened when I was in the US, because there an entree is a main dish. So I ended up having way too much food and learning a new word. So I speak 4 languages, and it's so interesting to me how different languages just borrow words from other languages and then change them to mean something totally different over time. For example, entree comes from a fancy old French dining tradition that had many courses, and in that context, an entree was often a hot dish that was made of meat, so a bit like a main course, which is still the meaning of the word in the US, while in France it evolved to mean the starter in a typical 3-course meal. And what's even more interesting to me is that foreign words evolve differently in different countries. Like, for example, at the time my English was already pretty good. Like, I had studied in the UK before moving to the US, and I had never heard the word entree there. So as you can see, it's not really that the way it's used in the US is wrong, it just evolved differently, and that's what makes languages so interesting to me. So you'll see this video is not about being right or wrong, but more about being curious. With that said, sometimes not knowing what a word means in another language can lead to a bit of a disaster, and you'll see what I mean in the next section. Anyways, while we are on the topic of eating, you've definitely heard the next one. And it's often said when people want to sound a bit extra or fancy in English, but that's not really the case in France. Here I'm talking about Bonapeti, which means enjoy your meal in French, and literally translates to good appetite. There's so much to say about this one. I think it was popularized by Julia Child, who is an American chef who lived in France and remade French cooking mainstream in the US. She ended all her shows with Bonapeti. Since then, people have been using this expression in a playful way. I'm thinking about the Bon Apple Tea meme, which is so funny to me because it's exactly how it's pronounced with an English accent. Like Bon Apple Tea, Bon Appetit, kind of sounds the same. But I'm not even gonna go there because it's just a joke and no one writes it this way seriously. And overall, people are just gonna say that when they're being a bit playful or they want to sound fancy, which as a French person, it's so funny to me that French equals fancy in a lot of those words. Like, there's really this idea that if it's French, it must be fancy. And you'll see later in this video, this is not entirely true. Like, I have a crazy example of this really backfiring for a big company. But anyways, in France, saying bon appétit before a meal is not really fancy. Like, that's not really a thing you would do in a formal setting, because it literally translates as good appetite, as in like, you'll need appetite to eat this. So a lot of people, me included, would only say that for non-formal settings. Like, you're sharing a meal with your friends and, you know, someone can say bon app, which is the short version of bon appétit. Again, you can keep doing whatever you want. Always fun to be playful with a foreign language. And, you know, just know that while English uses a bunch of French words to sound fancy, in France, we use a bunch of English words to sound cool or hip or modern. So if saying bon appétit makes you feel fancy, please go for it. Alright, this next one is really interesting to me because I have to admit that I always thought that people used it wrong, but it turns out that I was the one who was wrong. And it's this word, which I've heard people say connoisseur, and it basically means someone who has an expert knowledge in a topic, originally the arts, but now you can use it pretty much for everything and often in an ironic way.
Windsor and I consider ourselves pizza connoisseurs.
So in French, we have the same exact word, which is Koniser. And to be honest with you, I always thought we were in a Bon Apple Tea situation where people were just making up their own version of French to sound fancy, even if it's wrong. But actually, I was wrong, and it is a real word, and it comes from an old version of French called Middle French. So in modern French, it comes from the French verb connaître, which means to know. So a connaisseur is someone who is in the know. And quick fun fact, did you know that 30% of English words come from French? And that's because of the Normans who invaded England in 1066, and they brought Old French with them, and over time a lot of French words mixed over to English, and that's why we have so many words that sound similar or are the same in two languages. And honestly, that's why it was so easy for me to learn English vocab when I was learning English as a teenager. So many words are the same or very similar. The pronunciation though was so different, so saying them was a whole other story. Like, for example, you'd agree that those two words look the same. One is say journey and the others say journée. And also, I just want to end the debate on how you should call this food if you're speaking English. Like, even when a word comes from French or any foreign language for that matter, if you're speaking English, you're gonna say it with your normal English speaking accent. You're not gonna suddenly switch to a random French accent mid-sentence. Otherwise, you'd have to do that all the time because there are just so many French words in English. So you can consider this my official blessing to say croissant or anything along these lines and not croissant when you're speaking English. And by the way, if you've been wanting to learn French, you should check out today's partner, Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone is one of the easiest ways to actually start learning a language and use it in the real world, even if you're a total beginner. It's way more than just an app, it's a full-on language learning system. You get immersive lessons, pronunciation tools, live classes, audio for on-the-go learning, basically everything you need to start speaking with confidence. Rosetta Stone adapts to how you learn, and the lessons are built around real-world situations like ordering at a cafe or getting around the city. Also, if pronunciation stresses you out, their true accent feature will help you sound more like a local. It listens to how you say a word and gives you instant feedback based on millions of native speakers. At the moment, Rosetta Stone is offering an exclusive 60% off their unlimited language subscription, giving you unlimited access to one of their 25 languages for life with just one payment. So if you've been waiting for the right moment to learn a language, this is the perfect time. Just click the link in the description to check out this limited time exclusive deal. Also, what's cool is sometimes a foreign word makes its way into a language and we have no idea what it means or where it comes from, and that's the case with this next word. So if you've ever been invited to a wedding, you've probably received an invitation that looks like this, not really knowing that you're actually practicing your French vocab. And it's because this word, RSVP, is actually French for répondez s'il vous plaît, which means please respond. And since it already means please respond, you don't need to add an extra please in front of RSVP. Like, I have received a few please RSVP invitations, and in my head I read it like, please answer please before this date. And it sounds like you really want me to come to your wedding, and I'm flattered. Obviously, most people don't know about this cute little mistake. So as a French person, if I see that on an invitation, I'm obviously gonna be happy I'm invited. I'm not gonna be sending corrections in red ink or anything. Like, it's just cute and not a big deal. And there's another wedding related word that has a different meaning in my head than how people use it in English. But sometimes I see people trying to honor the French origin of the word and write, for example, my fiancé Bobby with this ending. And as a French person, I appreciate you trying, but if you write that, I'm gonna understand that you're engaged to a woman named Bobby, which is probably not what you're trying to tell me in that sentence. And that's because every word in French has a gender. Like, everything either has a male or a female characteristic, like a chair is a woman, une chaise, but a glass, un verre is a man. Why? I'm not sure, I'm not a linguist, but we do write words differently depending on the gender of the word. Like, un employé is a male employee, but une employée with that ending is a female employee. So since Bobby is a man, technically you should write my fiancé Bobby, and Bobby in return would say my fiancée Lucille with that ending since I'm a woman. Obviously, I don't expect everyone who gets engaged to know French grammar, so you can totally write fiancé with this ending or fiancé without an accent. This way it stays gender neutral. But one thing I do expect you to know, especially if you have plans to come to France, is this next one. I see a lot of people making this mistake and accidentally being super disrespectful. Also, some people have learned either in French class or in the movies that you should call your waiter by saying Garson.
Garson, coffee!
And I'm here to tell you that you should never do that in public with someone you don't know. It is offensive and you're seriously increasing the likelihood of the waiter hating you. And by the way, if you've watched Pulp Fiction, you know that
Garçon means boy.
So yes, garçon literally translates to boy, and in itself the word is not offensive, but you should not use that to call your waiter because this comes from the old expression garçon de café, which translates to coffee boy, which is how people called waiters back then when social hierarchies were stronger and customers were seen as above the waiters. And I have seen so many people do this in Paris, so please take me seriously. Don't call your waiter garçon. Call him monsieur if the waiter is a man, or madame if the waiter is a woman. If you want to know more about cultural norms, I've talked about it in this video, so I won't elaborate further. Alright, the next two are gonna get you lost from French speakers if you use them wrong. The first one is not a well-known word, but once you notice it, you'll see it everywhere, like in gaming, wrestling, even Eminem's latest album. And this is a French word that means final blow. Like, it means that you're ending someone's suffering by ending them. Luckily, this is not used literally, except maybe in wrestling. It's pronounced coup de grâce with a French accent, or coup de grâce if you have an American accent, just like the grass in your backyard. And since there's this fancy accent on the A in the French expression, people really want to go the extra mile and say it in a way that feels extra French to them, but a bit funny to me as a French speaker.
Slim Shady coup de grace, available later this summer.
So as a French speaker, when I hear this, I hear coup de grâce, which means being hit with fat. Like if someone threw a slice of bacon at me. And this is a classic example of people trying to make foreign words sound fancier or more exotic than they actually are. And no judgment here, apparently we all do it according to this Wikipedia page. Like there's an official name for it. And you know, it's always fun to be playful with foreign languages. Like when we're saying target instead of target, or when you're taking the garbage out. But you know, I feel it's always better when it's intentional. In life, I always prefer to have people laugh with me and not at me. And unfortunately, that's not what happened with this next one. So let me tell you about the word petite. So there's nothing wrong with how it's used in fashion to describe clothing that's made to fit smaller women. Like in French, petite literally means small, so nothing wrong here. But what can be a bit dangerous is that a lot of people think it's a cute and chic way to say that anything is small. And you know, as I've said before, there's nothing wrong with using French words because you think they're cute or they're cool. But you know, if you're gonna spend millions of dollars on an ad that's gonna be seen by a lot of people, maybe, just maybe, you should double check things before. So let's look at this ad campaign for Nancy's mini quiches called Petite Bites, Big Compliments. And you know, before I tell you why this is maybe the worst bilingual ad of all times, you should know that Nancy's is a major quiche brand that was acquired by Heinz. You can even find them at Walmart, so they have a lot of money. As a reminder, quiches are a French food, so it would have made sense to hire a translator, or you know, just ask any random French person, or even just Google it. So let's go back to the ad. Petite means small, as you already know. So in French, this word is not a snack. It means a certain male body part, which would get me censored by YouTube, I believe, and which also makes this ad peak middle school humor. And what's even worse for them or funnier is that if you read the full ad, it's Petite Bites, Big Compliments. So yeah, this is your warning to Google any foreign words you're gonna use in front of a lot of people. And this is a classic example of a cross-cultural double entendre or double entendre, which is another French word that I've seen used in English to mean something that has two meanings. One that's innocent, like serving mini quiches at a party and receiving compliments for it, and another one that's not so innocent. In French, we would say sous-entendu. Double entendre literally translates to double understand, and to me, it doesn't really mean anything. But it's also a perfect example of random French words that are used in a suggestive way when speaking English, and that are not suggestive at all in French. Like, for example, risqué, which means something suggestive in English, but in French, risqué means something dangerous, like base jumping, crossing the street without looking before, or not paying your taxes. These are risqués in French. It's not suggestive, it's just dangerous. The other one is a rendezvous, or rendezvous in French. In English, it always has a romantic meaning. In French, you book a rendezvous with your dentist, not your partner. And I believe it comes again from an old French expression, which is rendezvous galant, which translates to romantic rendezvous. But no one says that anymore. And most young people would say un date, so they would use the English word, but said with a French accent. And I have to say that as a French person, I was not aware of these stereotypes around the French language being the language of love until I traveled to English-speaking countries. Like, I've never considered the French language romantic, quite the opposite, and I've already unpacked this stereotype in this video. But yeah, overall, I'm not a fan of French being used in suggestive ways, because it has caused me quite a few misunderstandings, especially with the next word, which is ooh la la. Like, in English, it always means that something is suggestive. Like, you have that very funny scene from Back to the Future where he finds the ooh la la magazine.
Ooh la la.
So in French, it is used in a pretty opposite way, and depending on the tone you use, it either means you're surprised or you're complaining. It is 100% not a swear word, it is not vulgar. I would feel totally comfortable saying oh la la in a family setting. You know, it's like just you're done with life, just say oh la la. And on my side, it's the main way I express annoyance. And I've had to stop saying it when I'm annoyed because every time I get the weirdest looks. And it took me way longer than I'm willing to admit to understand that it's supposed to be suggestive in English when it's totally innocent in French. But you know, that's what's funny with languages, it kind of keeps you on your toes. And that's all for me today, so if you like that video, you should watch the ones that are on screen right now. I'll see you there. Bye for now.